Hey, it's John from Tinderbox Arts. So I'm making a little video here on the reconfiguration of my old kit here. Now, a little bit of history. This kit, or parts of it, go back over 4 decades. That's how old this is. And, you know, the kit has just become kind of an extension of my own body at this point. But as I get older, some things have changed, and I'm really finding it difficult to play on this thing. So I have the 2 bass drums, which is a result of time, really. Back in the day, in order to play double bass, you really had to have 2 bass drums. Double pedals really didn't exist yet. And I was interested back in the time in progressive rock and fusion bands, and I was just trying to get into double bass playing, and as a result, I picked up 2 bass drums. And I've been doing this, you know, all these years with the double bass. Now, I do have another kit, a smaller one, where I just use a double pedal, and that helped introduce me to the concept of double pedal work and some of the pluses and minuses. So, you know, when you have 2 pedals on one drum, you know, the rebound on the single head is different than when you have 2 bass drums and, you know, 2 different heads with different rebound. It just takes some getting used to. Nothing wrong with it. It's just a different feel. And then the one thing that is a disadvantage of a single pedal, or, you know, a double pedal, is that you don't have 2 different bass drum sounds. You have a single bass drum sound. So that's something, you know, it's not a deal breaker for me. So at this point in my life, as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that it just hurts to play the double bass setup because I can't really get the kit configured in a way that's comfortable anymore. Let me come around here and show you something. These pedals, you know, 2 different pedals, they're about 26.5 inches apart. Now, if I looked at my other kit with a single double pedal and a single bass drum, the pedals are about 19 inches apart. So a big difference there. And that additional spread, you know, it spreads your legs wide apart and it just becomes difficult to play. And I have aching knees and it's just not fun anymore. So the time has come to get rid of one of the bass drums and just concentrate on a single with a double pedal. That, I hope, will also allow me to kind of move my toms around. So, you know, getting over here to this 6-inch tom, again, as I get older, you know, becomes more difficult. And I'd like to be able to move everything down a little bit, move these 2 center toms over a little bit, and just kind of move everything down a little closer to the right side versus the left. So I'm hoping removing 1 bass drum will allow me to do that. And of course, the other thing it'll do is allow my hi-hat pedal to come closer as well. And by moving that over, you know, that gives me more flexibility with the toms. So there's a lot going on here. And last year I did some work with taking out stands that I've used for years and years and years and years and used the Gibraltar rack system. And that did help me quite a bit, but now I've purchased some additional rack items. So I'll have another curved bar going across here, and I hope that will allow me to take my toms and move them over as well. So a lot to figure out here. I don't really know what I'm doing yet until I do it. All right, the surgery is complete, and man, what a difference. I really should have done this years ago. So you can see I only have 1 bass drum now, and I got a huge space right here, which I actually might use for something else. I got to think about that. Made a couple minor changes as far as cymbals, but otherwise, it's basically the same amount of drums, but huge difference in how everything fits together. I'm going to show you in a second the pedals for the bass drum are much closer, which was the main thing I was after here, but everything else also moved closer together. So basically these toms were over here before. Now, I mean, it's a good 6 inches over. The upper toms, again, were way over here. Now they're another 6 inches this way. Everything is just much tighter together left to right. However, I also moved everything out quite a bit, actually, probably 4 inches or so, because they were really too close to me. My bass drum pedals were right underneath my legs, which were not good, ergonomically speaking. The toms were too close as well. So everything's changed quite a bit. Let me show you the back of the kit. All right, so back here, you know, here's the throne, right? And one of the major differences was the distance between these 2 pedals now is about 6 inches closer, which is, I can't tell you how much difference that makes as far as comfort and ergonomics. The hi-hat pedal is also, it was over here before, it's closer. You see I have it set back a little bit, which I'm not 100% I'm with now, but the thing is where I normally put my foot on the bass drum pedal and where I put it on the hi-hat pedal is actually a little different. So if they lined up perfectly, it doesn't actually make sense ergonomically speaking. So I'm pretty close to where I need to be here. But if I pull back a little bit here, these toms, again, were over here before, so that's moved over. These upper toms, the hi-hat used to split the toms. Now they've come down, so this one's a little bit lower, and you go back up here and down around the hi-hat. This drum here was probably 4 inches back, so that's 4 inches more forward than it was. Same thing with this floor tom. It was back here, now it's more, everything's just so much more comfortable. Cymbals haven't changed a lot. I added some splash cymbals and got rid of one of the Chinas. These splash cymbals are Wuhan, and they actually sound better than the Zildjian, so I'm happy I got those, and they're dirt cheap. So everything is just much more comfortable to play. This upper tom here is a 6 and 8, and again, these were way back here before. Now they've moved forward. Everything's just a lot more easy to reach. Before, when I went, did a roll from the bottom to the top, I was starting to catch rims because it just wasn't comfortable. It just didn't flow right. Now it's just a lot more easier to do that. Now the pedals I ended up with are not the highest end that Tama makes. They are Iron Cobra, but they're the 600 series. And I didn't want a super heavy pedal. This lighter pedal is fine. And I'm noticing with the single bass drum and these pedals, it's just, I'm a lot quicker with my feet. You use a lot more energy when you have two bass drums because, you have the head rebound of two different drums, plus my legs were too splayed apart. So it's just a lot easier to play this way. Now, one thing you might have noticed was I've cleaned up the microphones, and there's a different video about that. But, before I had the microphones mounted on the rims and they stuck out here. Now, I still do have a few mics, like I have an SM57 style here on the snare, and I have one of these older style mics that are mounted on the rim for this drum, but I made up a kind of a homemade mount for the microphones on the other toms. They're all concert toms, so I was able to mount them inside the drum, which really cleaned things up, and there's a different video about how I did that. Now, to mount all these drums closer together once I removed the other bass drum, I really only had to add a couple pieces of hardware. I'm using this Gibraltar rack system, and these curved bars here are how a lot of the stuff gets situated. So this curved bar, mounts on one stand here, a tom stand, and another tom stand here. And then in between, I'm using these mounts for the cymbals. To hold the hi-hat up, I don't have any legs on the hi-hat, so I'm using just a bar connected to this bar. You can see there's it's actually an old stand, I don't even know what it's from, and a clamp to connect the hi-hat, so that stays true. And then over here was the main difference. So I have I'm using the Gibraltar system here for the snare, so the snare drum is held up by a bar. The snare doesn't have its own tripod legs, it just has this bar going across. And then you have the Gibraltar stand here and an upright. These uprights I purchased are 30-inch bars, and then you can add a clamp on top here, which I did, and that clamp ends up getting used for a cymbal. And on the other side, I already had this one straight bar over here. I already had that. And what I did was, and I already had these legs here, so I added another 30-inch upright, again with one of those clamps on the top here, which can be used for a cymbal. And then the curve bar for the toms. Now, this is one area I had a little bit of trouble, but I was able to get around it. So these clamps, they are pretty strong, but it's chrome on chrome. So there's not a lot of friction there. And when I had the toms mounted in this direction, there's quite a bit of weight hanging off of that. So, that you have the clamp here, you have another clamp here for the tom, and all that weight is trying to pull it down. Plus, when you're playing it, it's pulling down as well. So I did have some slippage, and over time, these clamps would start to roll, towards me. So that wasn't working. And I was starting to second guess whether this was going to work at all. Same thing with this tom. But in the end, I just took some electrical tape and lined the inside of the clamp, and that was literally all it took to give a little bit more friction to the clamp, and now it's been fine. I haven't had any trouble, and I've been playing a few times, no trouble at all. The cymbals are not an issue as far as that. There's just not as much pressure on those. So on this bar, I have the 2 toms, 2 cymbals in the middle, and then a cymbal on the end and another cymbal on the other end. So, you know, it's quite a bit of weight on that, but you know, it's holding it fine, no problems there. This cymbal up here, I did keep on a stand. I really wasn't able to get it quite right. In the future, I could mount it here. Maybe I might try to do that still, but for now, I had the stand. It was just easier to leave it like that. So my cymbals mostly are mounted on these Gibraltar bars now, but I have, you know, one mounted on this one and another one over here. This is the 18-inch, is also still mounted on a tripod stand. So I'm so glad I made the effort to do this. Everything is just much more comfortable. I can play faster without as much effort. And the ergonomics are just hugely improved. So I'm sorry I didn't do this earlier, but you know, sometimes you get stuck in your ways. Now, the extra bass drum ended up, I had 2. One was an older one. It was not as good condition, so that's the one I took out. And I ended up, I just threw it over here. And while I was working on the other drums, this one started making its own set, which is kind of weird. I don't know how it happened, but it looks like I have a little bit of a problem. But anyway, we'll let that sit for now. Maybe it'll turn itself into a 4th kit, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 kits down here, and it's getting a little crowded. Anyway, that's how it all worked out, and I'm really pleased how it came out.